Hey, welcome to Visionary Womenpreneurs Radio, where we are talking with womenpreneurs that are changing the world with their vision, their strategies for success, their connections and collaboration, and their consistent action to make things happen. We are thrilled to have inspiring, innovative, creative womenpreneurs join us to share their vision of purpose and their business strategies. Join me in welcoming our next guest to Visionary Womenpreneurs Radio. Hey, this is Donna Price. Welcome to Visionary Womenpreneurs Radio. Today I have an incredible guest, Marisa Ferrera, who is an empowerment coach and mentor, passionate about helping men and women who are struggling with conflict and drama in their family and personal relationships. She works to create healthy, loving boundaries within their family so they can stand in their power. She shows them how to transform conflict into opportunities to heal and create deeper and more meaningful relationships. Marisa is the #1 international best-selling author of the book, Magnify Your Magnificence, Your Pathway to the Life and Relationships You Truly Desire. She's well known for following her heart and inspiring and encouraging others to do the same. Her faith and trust in listening to her inner guidance led her to attract the love of her life and build her dream life in the beautiful country of Colombia, South America. Please join me in welcoming Marisa Ferrera to the show today. Great. Well, welcome to Visionary Womenpreneurs Radio today, Marisa. I'm so thrilled to have you here from Colombia.
Thank you for having me.
I know that the focus of your business is working on people's relationships and connections and developing boundaries and in their personal relationships. And it's so important for us to all have good relationships, right? So what do you see as being the cause of conflicts for people within their relationships?
Well, we all know that all relationships have conflicts, whether people address them or not, avoid them or not, they're there. And what I believe is the underlying core of the conflicts is that people get triggered based on the actions of others. So sometimes we get triggered because of what somebody does. Sometimes we're triggered because of something they don't do. Sometimes we're triggered by what they say or what they don't say. And the triggers are often based on expectations we have around all of that. And when we're triggered, what I believe happens, and I know this is what happens for me and what happens with my clients, is that it activates a core wound from childhood that has not been healed. Mm-hmm. And so we react to what's going on. We're not able to just respond calmly and lovingly because we're reacting from that place of woundedness.
So when you're working with people, do you help them to go back to find that core wound or on healing the trigger, or what direction do you go in with people? Like, where is it important to focus?
Sure. That's a great question. I take my clients through what I call a transformational journey. And the first step of that journey is to uncover what those core wounds are, because many times they're unconscious. Yeah. We're reacting and we really believe that we're upset about what's happening right now because we think, well, if you didn't just say what you just said, I wouldn't be angry. Or if you didn't just do what you just did, I wouldn't be angry. And so we really believe that it's what's happening in the present moment that's causing our upset. So I help people unravel all of that and go back to what's really underneath that. What are they making that present experience mean? Mm. And usually they attach a meaning to it because of the past wound. So we look at uncovering what the wound is. What are they making it mean? For example, they're making it mean I'm not good enough. How many times do we have that thought going on, right? Or you think I'm stupid. That was one of my core wounds, right? Yeah. So if somebody would say something innocently in a relationship, I would just get upset and angry thinking they think I'm stupid, which they're looking at me like they weren't thinking that.
Yeah.
So it's something that was inside of me. So the trigger brings out what's inside of you. So the first step, you have to uncover what the wounds are. And so, of course, the second step is healing. So yes, we have different tools and strategies and processes that I take my clients through to help them to heal those wounds. And healing is in layers. Sometimes people want to believe that we can just heal something and then it's done.
Yeah.
And I wish it was that
please,
easy.
Please.
I wish, right? I mean, I've been working on myself and healing from past trauma and abuse for over 40 years. Yeah. And I wish I could say I never get triggered anymore. I'm just, everything's great. I always can respond from a loving, calm place. And that isn't the case. But what I can say is that I don't get triggered nearly as often as I used to in the past. And when I do, I'm much more able to recognize faster that I've been triggered, and then I can go and do some more healing work on another layer. Because what happens is in relationships, they're our greatest teachers, because whenever you're triggered, that's why I tell people triggers are the catalyst for healing and for creating deeper connections with the people we care about. Because as soon as you're triggered, there's some work to be done there. Your work, not the other person. They got their own work to do, but we need to take care of ours. So step 1 of the journey, uncover the wounds. Step 2 is heal from those wounds. And then the third step is to be able to create healthy boundaries that honor you while also respecting others. Because one of the reasons a lot of people don't have healthy boundaries is because of their wounds. They're afraid to stand up for themselves and speak their truth. They might be afraid of being judged or criticized and all of that. So those are the 3 stages that I take them through.
Okay. So does everybody have wounds?
I haven't met anybody who doesn't. I mean, if somebody says they don't, what I can say is this: if you ever feel angry, disappointed, hurt, those are clues that you've got wounds.
Yeah. Because
that's all being triggered from the past. Because otherwise we would just be able to have our experiences in life and say, even if we don't like something, we wouldn't feel devastated or get depressed or get really angry about something. We'd be able to look at it and say, wow, that's not something I really want in my life. And we'd be able to respond and act responsibly instead of reacting, right? So, I mean, if somebody says they don't have any wounds, they're probably just not conscious of them. So I would ask them, do you ever get upset with anybody? Do you have any judgments? Because judgments is another clue for us. Right? If we're judging somebody, where is that judgment coming from?
Well, I would think that you could have some people that would say, I had a happy childhood.
Yes.
And yes, you could have a happy childhood and still have wounds from.
Exactly.
And I remember reading a book where they talked about some of the wounds could be because you're a child and it's your perception of what somebody's done or said, even if it wasn't their intent to be hurtful, but the way you understood it, you were wounded by it.
Exactly. And that's a really good point that you raised. And that's part of when I mentioned earlier about the meaning that we attach to things.
Right.
As children, we do attach meaning to all our experiences, and even as adults. But if we're talking about the wounds that we carry with us from our childhood, we might feel that our parent didn't love us because they spanked you, or they were, like in my case, I did grow up with a lot of emotional and physical abuse. My father was a really big man. He was very scary. I was terrified of him. Now, I grew up for a long time. I hate to say the word hate, but, as a kid, it was, fear turns into hate, right? I mean, that's happening even today in our world, right?
Yes.
It's a natural thing. And of course, I felt a lot of shame around that and had to work through those feelings as well. But the reason I brought it up is because my interpretation was that, maybe he didn't love me, but he did love me. He just didn't know how to discipline properly. He was also abused as a child. He didn't have the tools for parenting in a more loving way. So from his perspective, being an immigrant as well from Italy, right? They're all very strict anyways. But from his perspective, if he didn't, rule with an iron fist, what would happen to his daughters? We might become, drug addicts, alcoholics, all this stuff. So he was doing it because of love, even though I might have interpreted it differently. So as I went through my healing process, I was able to see what was really going on and recognize that he was also acting from his own past pain and wounds that he never healed, and it just was getting carried on.
So for you to heal your wounds, does he have to heal as well? Or can you heal the wounds? Like, are you just responsible for your own wounds? Do you know what I'm saying?
I absolutely know what you're saying, and it's a great question. And the truth is we can only be responsible for ourselves, because we have absolutely no control over the choices of others. It doesn't matter what we want, what we desire for them. We are responsible for healing ourselves. But the beauty of it is when you heal yourself, those around you heal, because you start to show up differently. You've got a different energy around you. You're communicating in a different way. So you're modeling what's possible. And they may or may not ask you how you're doing it, or they may want to learn more. But in my father's case, I didn't expect him to heal, or I didn't even need him. Well, for many years, I think I wanted an apology, right? And
well, that's what I was thinking, is like,
yeah,
you could say, I can't heal until he apologizes.
Exactly. But the problem with that is that's giving our power away, right?
Yeah.
I was giving him the power that I cannot be well in my life. I cannot be happy in my life. I can never heal from my past unless you do something, which is say, I'm sorry. I mean, that is totally making me powerless. So when I accepted the fact that it's not, whether he can apologize or not, I can heal myself. I deserve to be happy, as we all do. And we don't need anything from anyone in order for that to happen. And as long as we're holding on to the belief that we do, we're stuck. It's a self-imposed prison.
Right. Well, I think that's a really important thing for people to understand, is that our own health or wellness isn't dependent on the actions of the other person.
Exactly.
And so I know that one of the things that you talk about that I saw on your website was about boundaries. And that seems like something that becomes important then in developing your own health, or is creating some boundaries for yourself. So is that, how do you help people figure out how you do that, what those are?
That's great. Yeah. Well, first of all, people usually have an idea of the boundaries that they don't have, because whenever you give your power away, that's a boundary that you don't have in place, right? So if you're not speaking up for yourself, we look at what's stopping the person from taking a stand and expressing themselves authentically. And usually it's based on some kind of fear. Like I had mentioned before, they might be afraid of being attacked verbally, being criticized, being even rejected from their family, right? Because sometimes, depending on your family dynamics, it's kind of like there's expectations from other family members. And if you don't show up the way they expect you to, and usually they expect you to be exactly the way you were growing up, we all have our roles, right? And if you try to break out it free from your role that's not serving you, it upsets the whole family dynamic. And that's another big part of what I help my clients with, is look at those family dynamics that they grew up with. And what roles are they playing now, and what's serving them and what isn't. And so it's really important to be able to identify what those are, so that you can create the boundaries. And one of the things around boundaries that some people don't realize is that when we don't have a boundary, there is a payoff for it. Like when we say yes to everything because we're afraid of saying a no, for example, what's the payoff? Well, the payoff is feeling accepted, but it's a false sense of acceptance, right? It's not unconditional. It's just what we want, right? So we look at what are their payoffs and what stories have they made up around the lack of boundaries, and how can they create new, more empowering stories, and how can they take a stand from a loving place, because that's the important thing. That's why we do the healing work first, because what happens with some people when they don't heal their wounds and they just try to, say, that's it, I'm not being a doormat anymore, I'm going to make some boundaries. They do it in a very forceful, aggressive way. Right? It's like, nobody's going to treat me like that ever again, or how dare you, this and that. And so it's coming from anger. It's not coming from love. And so I want to help people come from love, because it's a lot harder for other people to react to you when your energy is coming from love. And it's not saying they won't, but it won't be as hostile, right?
Right. Well,
So,
you can
yeah,
feel the difference even as you talk about it.
Exactly. And I showed it.
Yeah,
Exactly. And we've all experienced it, right? I mean, we've been that way too, because I remember when I was first trying to take a stand for myself, for example, because I mean, I grew up where, you know, speaking is just not safe. It's better to just be quiet and invisible. So that's what I did, right? So when I was in my first marriage, well, first I was in a relationship with somebody where I was acting out more the passive role, you know, because that's all I knew, just to get along. I didn't have an opinion about anything. You know, he'd say, oh, what movie do you want to go to? Oh, it doesn't matter. Where do you want to go? You know, where do you want to go to eat? Oh, it doesn't matter. I had no idea what I liked, what I did, because I never learned how to, well, I had shut that part of me down. Let's put it that way, right? So I was like, I don't know. Well, that relationship came and went, and then I ended up married to someone else years later. And the interesting thing was I was trying on a new role where I'm going to stand up for myself, right? But I was coming more from the anger, and I was getting angry a lot. And I was like, because I had a husband who was very nice, but he was more like, what do they call it? Not covert. When people are kind of aggressive, I think it's covert aggression. So it was kind of like not coming home on time for dinner, even though he said he would, and stuff like that. You know, it seems like nothing, but over time, things would really upset me. So I was at the other end of the pendulum, right? So I went from being kind of this meek and everything's fine, who didn't know herself, to this, you know, wicked witch of the West kind of thing. I feel sorry for him now. But, you know, that relationship ended after 10 years. But again, what's interesting was I ended up ending it, not him. So that was a surprise. But in any case, the reason I brought it up is we play on these different roles but I was continuing to heal and I recognized, wait a minute, I don't want to be neither one of those is who I really am.
Right.
Right. It's just, they're both acting out of woundedness.
Yeah.
Right. I want to connect with my authentic self. So once you connect with who you are, I believe all of us deep inside, we're just these loving, beautiful, magnificent beings, you know, just trying to do our best in this world with all the, you know, things that we've experienced. It's not easy. So step by step, we do the healing work, and we can create those boundaries where we can say to somebody in a loving way, if they're verbally attacking, you know what, I can tell that you're upset right now, and that's okay, because people's feelings are fine. You can validate them. Well, then you go on to say, but you know what, it's not okay for you to be yelling and screaming at me.
Right.
I would appreciate it if you would just, you know, calm down. We can continue having this conversation, but if you're not ready to do that, I'm just going to leave or hang up or whatever. That's taking a stand.
Yeah.
Not from, you stop talking to me like that and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, hey, this is not okay. Right?
Yep.
But we have to take responsibility for our own boundaries and say what's okay and what's not, because that's another thing. People think they want to blame other people, but no one's to blame, not you and not them. We need to let go of the blame game. I keep saying, because blame just, who wins when you start pointing fingers?
Yeah.
It doesn't solve anything.
No, not at all. One of the things that you said was about family dynamics. And I always think of it as a dance almost. You have these kind of patterns of behavior or arguments, and you can like if you could step out and watch yourself, see that like he or she does this and he or she responds like this, and and I always tell my kids, like, you have to, if you change the dance, like you change one step in this dynamic, the whole thing changes.
Exactly.
Because now that the other person's like off balance. Like if you think of it as dancing.
Sure. And in the same token, with the same analogy, you're going to step on some toes and it might hurt.
Yeah.
As you rearrange the dance routine to be prepared for that.
So again, going back to the doing it from that place of love, I guess that's important, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to get hurt along the way.
No, and that's a really good point, because that's one of the things that stops people from having boundaries. One of the things a lot of people tell me is they're afraid of hurting somebody else's feelings, right?
Right.
And I get that. I mean, who wants to hurt somebody else?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good to see that your actions are saying no to helping somebody when you know you could, but it's,
Right.
you know, you're doing it out of obligation. So there's not a really clean yes. It doesn't feel good. However, again, just like other people are not responsible for our feelings, we're not responsible for theirs. So we can still be compassionate with how they're feeling, but if we allow the feelings of others to dictate the choices we make, that's another giving your power away. How do you do that? I mean, everybody wants different things, needs different things, has different wounds that they're operating from. So you're going to have to be like a chameleon, this way with that person, this way with that person. Like, you got to change who you are depending on who you're with.
Right.
Right. But when you take a stand to connect with who you really are, and you, again, heal the wounds, because you can't come across loving with someone if you still have a lot of
Right.
your own stuff in the way,
Yeah.
right? But when you can communicate from that place and you take responsibility for your own feelings, your own actions, everything, you actually demonstrate to other people and give them permission to be the same with you. And that's another reason why some people don't have boundaries, is because they know if they take that stand, other people might, and they might not get what they want anymore either. It's a two-way
Right.
street, right? It's like, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Because how many times do we get upset with somebody else because they don't do what we want them to do? We need to give people the freedom of choice as well.
Right. Well, and I think in relationships, there has to be some, I mean, there's work in relationship as well.
Absolutely.
And compromise. Like, it's not all my way.
Yes.
So, like, when we're living together or working together,
Mm-hmm.
like, we need to have that communication so that we're figuring what those boundaries are, but also maybe compromising to some extent. Do you think?
Yeah, and it depends. I'm not sure I like the word compromise so much, because
Okay.
sometimes compromise feels like you're giving up something.
Yeah, it does.
Right? Just the word. So what I do when I work, you know, in terms of relationships with, say, with couples, because that's obviously there's a lot of conflict. The more time you spend with somebody, the more opportunity for conflict, obviously, right? Because you're together. That's why this whole situation now is so hard for people, because they're spending more and more time together, right? So I look at it more from, if you can, again, both people are committed to peace and harmony in the relationship. They have to both want that. Because if one person wants that and the other one just wants to get their own way, it's going to be really hard. So we need to let go of, it has to be my way.
Right.
And be open. So it's kind of like, this is what I want. This is what you want. How can we create a third circle that we can both feel good about? And so that's what, like you said, communication is the key. What's important is to talk about why this is important to you, the other person, why that's important. Because you'll find when you really get down to it, most of the time, one person in the relationship, when you're talking about any particular issue, one person is more, I don't know, what's the word there? It's more important to them than it is to the other. Like something as simple as putting like, we don't have a dishwasher, but people do, but something as simple and as insignificant as putting your dishes in the dishwasher, right? For one person, if it's like really important to them to have a nice clean place and blah, 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 and the other one doesn't really care, then the other one can maybe just put it in there because it creates a peaceful, harmonious relationship. So you're doing it out of love, not out of, so the person doesn't yell and scream at you for how many times do I have to tell you, blah, blah, blah. It becomes an agreement.
Right.
So I like to look at it as, how can we create agreements with each other that nobody's going to walk away feeling like you're winning, I'm losing. Like, how can we create a win-win? And when you really sit down and speak heart to heart, not ego mind to ego mind, like I said, where you want to blame, point fingers, get your own way, but when you really, really, really speak from your heart, you can come to an agreement on what's going to work for both of you. There's always a solution.
Yeah. And do you ever work, like it seems like some of that is good, like before you're deep in 20 years into the relationship.
Yes, it's never
Like maybe
too late.
ahead of time.
Yes, it's never too late, but it is much easier ahead of time, for sure. Because, and that's something that my current husband and I did when we first decided we were going to be living together. I was on my own, he was on his own. We both did everything, right? So I thought, if we don't have a conversation, the expectations are going to be there, right? He's going to have certain expectations of what I'm going to do. I'm going to have expectations of what he's going to do. And when they're not met, we're going to start having arguments and fights.
Yeah.
That's, look around. That's what's going on, right? It's nothing, So we sat down, we literally sat down and wrote on a piece of paper all the things that need to be done in a home, practical things like cooking, laundry, dishes, grocery shopping, cleaning the house, taking out the garbage, looking after the car. Like, we listed everything. And we just said, okay, if you had your choice, if we wanted, split this evenly, so, we feel like we're both cooperating and creating the home that we want. If you had your choice, what would you choose? So we started with that, preferences. Yeah. Now, in our case, it worked out really well because our preferences were different.
Right.
He said, well, I'd much rather cook than clean. I said, I'd rather clean than cook. We got a deal. Like, it's like, and it worked like that for everything, right? So it worked out really well. Now, so we said, okay, so it was never like, oh, I'm cooking again. When is he ever going to cook? Or I was in a past relationship where the laundry basket just kept getting higher and higher. And I would think, well, is he ever going to do the laundry? Like, does he, or the garbage? Like, is he ever going to put out the garbage? It has to be me all the time. Again, never spoken, no agreements, expectations.
Right.
Very different when you've got the agreements, because now it's like, I don't have to think about the meals. He doesn't have to think about whether he's going to have clean clothes or a clean house. It's just taken care of. It's just so much more peaceful. So we can do that in our relationships, even if you've been in it for a while. Again, you can start a conversation and say, you know what, I'm just so grateful, for our relationship. I love you a lot, and I want to look at how we can make it even better.
Right.
So I'd love to have a conversation with you around, what's working well for you? What would you like to see different? And again, create agreements.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think also it would be important to have, maybe in your agreement, like a time where you're going to check in on those. Like, how's this working? Is this really, like, we agreed to it, but does it still feel good? Or do we need to adjust things?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we did say that at the end of when we had it all agreed. We said, now we'll see how this goes. And we didn't say we'll check in a week, or we didn't like create an appointment for it, but we made an agreement. This was another agreement that if you ever feel like this isn't working, then take the responsibility and speak up. Don't be afraid to say it's not working. And at one point, this was many years ago, my husband did say, I'm feeling like, cooking every day just seems to be a lot, and I'm not sure I want to do 3 meals or he was cooking dinners. I was working outside of the home at the time. I don't think I want to do this all the time. So I agreed to do it on the weekends when I was home, because so we changed it. So nothing's carved in stone. The whole intention is to create peace and harmony in your relationship. So if you're not feeling peaceful and harmonious inside of you, it's your responsibility to speak up in a loving way.
Yep.
Right. And then you just change the agreements and make new ones as you grow together. Yeah.
My partner, my husband and I created agreements in the beginning also. And I feel like we haven't checked in on those in a while. Different, than how you did it, but still, like there was, like, it gave you something to say, like, hey, remember how we agreed? And like, it doesn't feel like we're doing that right now. Like, we would bring it back to that agreement if something came up. But I know that you have a book. Does your book talk about this, or?
Well, the book
talk about your book.
Talk about my book. Okay, my book is called Magnify Your Magnificence, Your Pathway to the Life and Relationships You Truly Desire. Now, the book was created before I started working actually with specifically on relationships and boundaries. And there is a connection, although it's not like I'm talking about agreements or this and that. It's kind of interesting because I don't know if you or all the people in your audience know about channeled messages or information that comes through people or whatever. But this is how this book came to be. It kind of was information that came through me and I recorded it. But what's interesting about it is that each of the messages, they're very, very powerful. They're filled with a lot of wisdom. I've learned from them as well, but they're all really focused on helping us to really connect with our inner truth, the magnificence of who we are. Even the title came to me because I asked for a title. I didn't want to try to come up with one. And it's so each of the messages has information that helps us connect with who we are. There's information in there about healing from past wounds, around looking at negative self-talk, looking at our self-love, all that kind of stuff. And they all have exercises with them as well that can help us to integrate the messages. Because if you just have information but you don't know what to do with it, it doesn't change your life, right?
Right.
So I really loved how it came through that way. So it's definitely aligned with feeling happier and more peaceful with yourself and be able to extend that into your relationships. Absolutely.
Great. Well, I think when you're happier, peaceful with yourself, you're more able to have these kinds of conversations with someone that you're in relationship with.
Yeah, and that's why they say, you often hear that little line that says you can't give what you don't have, or you can't love someone if you don't love yourself, or, you know, those kind of lines. Right. There's truth to that. And if you're having difficulty having compassion for someone else because you're not giving it to yourself, or if you judge other people a lot, you probably have a lot of self-judgment too. So when we start to deal with our own stuff, it's amazing when you heal how you start to see the woundedness in other people in the simplest things. Like it's like these neon lights are going on all over the place, and they don't even see it, but you can see it but not from a place of judgment. You can see their pain. You can, even though they might be acting in ways that people would judge as really mean or nasty or whatever, you can really see the wounded child inside of them that's just wanting love like we all do.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So for people to get the book, they can go to your website?
Yeah, I've got a link on my website that even has a little bit of the prologue. There's a little bit they can read from the book right there if they want to do that before deciding if they want to buy it or not. And it's very reasonable. I mean, I think it's still on. I've never changed the price in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I think it's $3.33 for the digital and $11.11 for the paperback. It's very reasonable.
It is. I was on your website and I saw $3.33.
Yeah. There's a reason for that too, because that was the time I was awakened. Yeah, that was the time in the morning I was awakened when the first message came through, so it was significant to me.
Nice. Okay, so magnifyyourmagnificence.com is the website for people where they can find the book. And you also have a free download on creating healthy boundaries.
Yes, and learning how to say no, because I found that was one of the things people would tell me was the most difficult. They were like, I don't know how to say no. You know, they didn't have the words. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to put something together. I think there's about 7 different scenarios where somebody might make a request of you that you want to say no, but you don't know how. So I actually give words and scripts. But I tell people, you know, you have to change the words around so it's the way you speak. But it's a great template to start from. And people have found that very, very helpful. So people can download that for free on my website.
That's great. And I think it sounded like the book, there's work to do in the book. So that's one of the important things, is to not just get the book, but do the work as well. Not just get the book and read the book, but do the work as well.
Exactly. And to not try to rush through it, like take your time. I mean, I've gone through the book more than once and done the exercises myself, because it doesn't really matter where we are on our life journey. There's always deeper levels where we can take ourselves and get to know ourselves on a deeper level, heal on a deeper level, learn how to love on a deeper level, all that kind of stuff. So every time you would go through it, you're going to have a different experience.
That's great. I find that for myself too, with one of the books that I wrote, if I'm reading something or telling somebody about it, it's like, I need to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's good to go back to some of those things, and also to see like if you've gone through the book once, then to see where you've come since that time, I would think is interesting to observe for yourself of this is where I was, this is where I am, and this is the work I still have to do. So that's powerful. So I know you also work with people via like in person or in person digitally, maybe.
Yeah, coaching and mentoring. Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit so that people understand how they can be in touch with you for that as well.
Sure. Well, if anyone wants to even just connect with me and just talk, they can go to talkwithmarisa.com. Marisa has one S in it, not two. And we can have a complimentary session together where I can help you really uncover what might be going on in a relationship that you're struggling with. Maybe help you see some things that you don't see and give you some ideas on, where you can go. And if we feel that we want to work together, then, I can tell you how we can do that. But of course, I'm not into the pressure stuff about, well, if you really cared about yourself and that kind of stuff. I don't like it when people do that to me. No. So, it's just an opportunity really to see where you're at and see whether or not we would be a good fit to work together. But so I work privately. I also do, I have a group program, which I'm probably going to run again soon. I'm just putting some things together for that. So those are the ways people can work with me, or they can even just join my free private Facebook group where I offer a lot of valuable content. I do Facebook Lives. We talk about different things in the group as well, so they can find, and that's Magnify Your Magnificence. It's all the same names. So they can find that on Facebook.
I'll put that link in the show notes as well as the other links so that people can find that. Okay. So I'm kind of going to go back to the beginning, but how did you discover for yourself that this was the work that you wanted to do?
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't start here. My path started actually as a preschool teacher. And I was just looking at the year and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it was over 40 years ago when I became a preschool teacher. And then I went back to school and got my degrees in teaching and all of that and became an elementary school teacher. So I've always had a love for kids. And I believe that part started because growing up, like I said, in a very challenging environment, I wanted to create a safe and loving space for kids. That was really what drove me to want to teach. And so I taught for many years. And then at one point I left the system and started my own holistic private school for the kids that were just not fitting into the system. And I loved that, but that ended. And then I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And what led me here was I found that I was just people were always coming to me and asking me for advice around relationships because because of the relationship I have now, which has been almost 20 years. It's just, an incredible relationship. So I was just naturally coaching and mentoring and helping friends and family. And even through my teaching days, I was always helping the students learning how to deal with the conflict and how to connect with who they were and deal with all the stuff going on. And so I've always had this passion for helping people just see how wonderful they are, no matter what people are saying, whether they were little kids or adults or the parents that I was working with. And so over time, I realized that this is just a natural gift that I have. And when my husband and I decided to leave Canada and wanted to live abroad, it just made sense to create something that I could do, that I could work from anywhere in the world and work with anyone in the world. And so I started putting together this client journey and program that I could help people to do what I've done. And part of it was, again, because of my own trauma and healing from it. And recognizing, how amazing it is when you can go from, I had mentioned to you where, I didn't have such great feelings about my father growing up. And even as a young adult, I didn't feel good going home to visit because there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress around it. But over the years, by doing the healing work that I did, I was able to come to a place of true forgiveness for my dad, true understanding and compassion, and went from hating him to loving him so much that I was by his side his last 2 months of his life. He died in 2015. And I just thought, I want people that are struggling with family relationships to know that it doesn't really matter what it looks like. There's always a possibility for it to evolve into something that you really desire. It's not a guarantee because, again, there's certain situations when people do need to walk away. And, I guide people with that too, to know whether you're walking away because you don't want to face your own demons type sort of thing, or are you walking away because it's the safe thing that you need to do for yourself. Right. So that's a delicate line, right? But in my case, it wasn't like I was continuing to be, abused by my father like I was in the past. He still had that kind of harsh personality at times, but I didn't take things personally like I did before because I could understand what was really going on. So I wasn't being hurt like I would have been if I hadn't done the work. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
So that's what kind of drove me to focusing on families and couples. And because, again, our family relationships, they're so important to us. And they're so powerful and they're so impactful, and they impact every area of our lives. If your family relationships are not good, it influences even, your family. Like in your case, you've got a relationship obviously with your partner, but if your relationship with siblings or your own parents isn't going so well, it comes into your relationship with your spouse too, right? It affects your work, your ability to concentrate, whatever's going on at work. So if we can heal ourselves and our family relationships, it just, anything's possible to live with more peace and love. Yeah.
That seems like a good place for us to wrap up, ending on peace and love. Anything else that we haven't talked about that you wanted to share with people before we close out?
Just one little big thing that I really like to say, and I actually did a Facebook Live on it yesterday, because it's something that a lot of people, when they first hear it, they don't buy it, they struggle with it, but if you really reflect on it, there's a lot of truth to it. I truly believe that everyone, us and everyone, no matter how they show up in the world, no matter how they act, is doing the best they can with the tools they have, with their level of consciousness, with their awareness. They're doing the best they can, even though it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's something I like to leave people with, to just kind of explore. If you were to actually look at somebody as that's the best they can do, like I did with my dad, he was not capable of showing up any differently. But that changed our relationship dramatically. And then, you know what's interesting? It started changing just in terms of the way he was responding to me. And that's the beauty of it. Like I think I mentioned earlier, when you change how you are, when you're in that peaceful, healed space, it makes a difference to the people around you. It really does. It's worth taking that inner journey.
Right. Yeah, you did say that earlier. And I believe that that's really true. Like how you're showing up affects everybody else.
Yes.
And so if you're showing up from that place of love and you've done the work and have done a lot of healing for yourself, it just changes all the dynamics around you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Very powerful.
So I want to remind people that they can find Marisa's book for $333 on her website. And the free book, to create healthy boundaries, on the website also, and that's magnifyyourmagnificence.com. And we'll have all the links that we've talked about today in the show notes for people to just click and get there easily. I want to just thank you for being here and talking with me. It's so cool that you can be here from Colombia, and we can have this conversation from different parts of the world. So thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me today on Visionary Womenpreneurs Radio. I hope you have gained some great insights for your entrepreneurship or your professional career. Visionary Womenpreneurs Radio is hosted by Anchor.fm, but you can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Overcast, Radio Public, Stitcher, and Pocket Casts. So please visit your favorite podcast site and subscribe to Visionary Womenpreneurs Radio. We'd love to have you as a regular listener. I'm your show host, Donna Price, and you can pick up our new Visionary Womenpreneurs field guide at visionarywomenpreneurs.com. I hope you have a great day.